Welcome to Dark Facade, a channel dedicated to looking past the veneer of humanity and finding its true face. I will be your tour guide down this winding path of tales, ranging from the supernatural, science fiction, and twisted love. All the stories you're about to hear are assorted bits of literature that will range from the bizarre to the unexpected. So sit back, lower the lights, and allow yourself to be taken away from everyday reality to its shadowy reflection. If you enjoy our unusual content, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to receive more. Thank you. The Book of Dark Names by Katie Rogers, read by Katie Rogers, Chapter 10. A new kind of mayhem had covered the college campus the following day. The National Guard, along with a frenzied media circus, had taken over where Throg had left off. Viewers were receiving all kinds of warnings by reporters of the graphic nature of the footage they were about to see. Christopher watched in dismay as a generic blonde journalist talked about the blood and death all around her with a gleam in her eye. She seemed to be getting some sort of warped glee from the whole ordeal. Most people would have just dismissed her behavior as beneficial to her career, but he knew better. The videos taken of the whole ghastly event had blown up on social media outlets within hours. At first, there were speculations that the gruesome footage was some sort of awful hoax, a public execution followed up by random people getting ripped apart and eaten by an invisible monster, seemed far-fetched. The doubting stopped, however, with the presence of the police and the National Guard on the college campus. Christopher had not dared to venture online. Watching the jackals of the major media outlets was bad enough. Evelyn drifted in beside him with some fresh fruit and coffee. She poured him a cup, and after adding light cream, handed it to him. "Thank you," he murmured, then took a quick sip. She simply nodded while taking note of the deep lines and bags around his eyes. He hadn't slept a wink, but how could he under these circumstances? He'd been through hell, and the fact was, the nightmare wasn't over yet. She saw many more sleepless nights in all their futures. The rest of the crew began to filter in and watch the mayhem unfold on the television. The horror on their faces was only reflected by what they saw on the screen. They continued to view the aftermath of Throg in silence a little while longer, until Laura finally spoke. "Tell me again how you all escaped? Did you say that thing just let you go?" "I'm not sure. After it killed Rashad, we got out of there," Evelyn told her. "To be honest, I'm surprised that the authorities didn't try to stop these videos from circulating. That seems to be their MO in situations like this," Daniel said. "Well, they were uploaded and circulated shortly after they were filmed. Any chance they had of containing this fiasco was lost when the first one went viral," Christopher replied irritably. The mention of Cody and Kaylee's names brought everyone's attention back to the TV. The reporter gave yet another warning to parents and guardians to remove small children from the room due to the graphic nature of the footage. A video of the execution obtained from YouTube popped up on screen before Laura was able to turn the set off. Christopher stewed in silence, but the anger in his eyes spoke volumes. "You know, I don't think Rashad was entirely wrong about the human race. He might have had a point," he laughed bitterly. "The media can be vultures at times," Sean said in an attempt to reassure him. "Yeah, I suppose, but they only do what their viewing public wants, don't they?" Evelyn gently took hold of his chin and tilted his head in her direction. She gazed sympathetically into his eyes that were red with fatigue and pain. "No one knows better than we do just how cruel people can be. All of us had to find a way to live with the terrible truths we came to know, and eventually you will too." Even though he had little faith in her reassurance, he appreciated what she had to say. If he was going to have to suffer such misery, he was in good company. Evelyn always seemed to know what to say to him. She was a perfect child psychologist. Her entire career revolved around helping the most vulnerable members of society. Today, that was just how Christopher felt. He was no more than a very lost child that needed to be found. He was glad it was Evelyn who had come looking for him. A frantic knocking on the door burrowed through the heavy silence. Their eyes trailed over to the hallway camera on the wall that displayed the front porch. To their relief, it was not another reporter. The press had been relentless since the whole ordeal had taken place yesterday. They were stationed outside of Christopher's door like buzzards that were waiting for their wounded prey to die. Sean had called in a favor from an old colleague that ran a security company. They had placed a small barricade on Christopher's lawn. The faces that were staring back at them from the screen, however, were that of the guard and Richard. Once Sean gave the okay to let him in, Dr. Phillips wasted no time with acquainting himself with the rest of the group. He came barreling in with a stack of books under one arm and his laptop under the other. The professor managed to blurt out an apology for his abruptness before asking everyone to sit down. The small assembly granted his request and watched curiously while he set up his books and computer as if he were preparing for a class. When he finished, he took a deep breath and began to explain. "Hello, everyone. I'm sorry for the sudden intrusion, but I managed to get my hands on the footage from the security cameras in the Welcome Center." He tapped the mouse on his computer and brought up a video file, then pressed play. The room fell into an intense silence as they leaned in to watch. The camera angled in on the front desk area of the atrium. A huge circular mirror was hanging directly behind it. Within minutes, a peculiar darkness began to cover the silver glass. It swirled about like a liquid in a cauldron until at last it began to form. The blackness took on a human shape. At first they all wondered if it could have been a trick of light or shadow that was playing off the looking glass. Their suspicions were soon put to rest when they saw the figure emerge from the mirror as if being born from a womb. The entity came out head first, then stumbled onto the floor. The thing did not move at all, but lay low as part of the shadow on the ground. In the next frame they witnessed Christopher, Evelyn, and Richard running out of the building. After they had gone, the strange shadow emerged as a man from the murky corners of the floor. The blood-soaked Throg, who was partially visible now because he was coated in bodily fluid and tissue, came over and stood by the stranger. Man and beast exchanged glances at one another until at last the shadow-born male pointed at the mirror. It spiraled like a ripple of water, then opened to what appeared to be a starry sky. He then ordered Throg to go through it, and he obediently complied. After the doors closed behind him, the dark stranger turned his gaze towards the camera. His features were more visible now. Long black hair spilled down his shoulders and bare chest. He was unusually tall, standing well over 6 feet. His eyes were almost as dark as the shadow he had emerged from. The stranger's stare seemed to pierce through the camera lens to the people on the other side. A menacing grin covered his lips as he tipped his head before disappearing completely. The group sat in stunned silence after viewing the footage. No one really knew what to make of it all. The only thing they were certain about was that Rashad had accomplished what he set out to do. He had unleashed unspeakable horror on the world. What disturbed them even more was that they didn't have a clue on how to fight back. These were uncharted waters they'd been thrust into, and even the most open-minded among them were having trouble navigating through this sea of science fiction. "Has anyone else seen this footage? What do they make of it?" Christopher asked, breaking through the silence. No one else who viewed this tape saw what we just saw, Richard replied, dumbfounded. What? How can that be? It's all right there, Laura stammered. I know, but I'm telling you, everyone from campus security to the police and the press only saw the three of us running away. They didn't see the shadow guy or Throg go into the mirror. Hell, they're still trying to piece together what happened on campus, Richard laughed in astonishment. Okay, we know we are the only ones who saw this, right? So how come? Laura shrugged. Because the message that was being sent was for us, Anna declared. All eyes in the room turned towards her. The Shadow Man was trying to tell us something. He could see us just as we could see him. It wasn't our imaginations, she said with conviction. So what do you think he was telling us? Christopher asked. The board is officially set. Now it's our move, she said balefully. So, Richard, do you have any idea who this guy is? Daniel inquired. Phillips clipped his mouse again and brought up a simple drawing that resembled the man they had just seen. Even though the illustration was a bit elementary, they recognized him. This is from Rashad's book, The Rule of Night. I believe our dark friend there is Kaddath, Richard told them. Anna was the first to retreat away from the image. She and Kaddath had already met. He was the man in the dark that had frightened her as a child, and the terrifying presence in the mirror. What can you tell us about him? Sean asked. He's a rather nasty character. He and his twin sister Khafra were two of the most malevolent and powerful deities in the pantheon that Howard wrote about. They're the ones that can release the others, Richard explained. I'm sorry, but if he and this Khafra are the ones that can release the others, then how did Throg get out? Daniel asked, confused. Well, that's where all the murders and cursed objects came in. The text that was carved on all the artifacts was Throg's name. All the murders were ritual sacrifices to him. Believe it or not, he is the least powerful of all the beings, so the amount of blood and darkness it would take to release him could be achieved on a lower scale. You mean like a series of murders committed against corrupt souls with extremely cursed objects, Laura deduced. Exactly, Richard smiled. So you're saying Throg had to be released so he could release these two? Evelyn asked. Yes, I think his rampage on the campus generated the amount of violence and blood needed to open their gate, Richard explained. Does it require both of them to release the others? Sean asked. Yeah, pretty much, Richard replied. But in the footage we saw it was just him, Akaike pointed out. Yes, Richard nodded. Then we might have a shot at containing this before it gets any worse, Daniel said, catching on to Sean's train of thought. Is there anything in the book about how we can close these gates and put them back? Christopher asked. No, not in this one. But there is another called the Book of Dark Names that is mentioned in Rashad and Howard's works. According to both authors, it was written shortly before the Great Old Ones defeated and banished the Elder Gods. If this book even exists, where would we find it? Evelyn asked. I'm afraid that is a secret Rashad and Howard took to their graves, Richard sighed. Then perhaps that's where we should start, Sean suggested.